Hello and happy Thursday, everybody. Josh here with On the Wrong Lead, and we are back to Keeneland. Churchill Downs is no more. I mean, their turf course was no more the entire fall, anyways. But back to Keeneland, I mean, we're kind of in the home stretch here before the Breeders' Cup, which will be held in beautiful Del Mar, and someone who I hope to be enjoying many Del Margaritas with at Del Mar, Mr. Mark Capitan. How you doing, Mark?
There's a Del Margarita. That's a
Yes,
thing.
there is. Yes, there
What
is, and
makes
I
it a
only want to
Del?
have it
What
because
is
of
it
the
like
name.
special? Yeah, I mean, really, like, why else would you have it? What makes it special?
I have no idea. Probably that's $20.
Okay, okay, cool. That sounds
Yeah.
right. But by the way, I'm currently drinking a margarita. So
Yeah, there you go. I
yeah.
going back to my roots here. I have a nice. Oh man, I always forget. I got to turn off the. And it's always hard for me to turn off the damn blur when it comes to this. What do you here? See if that works. Yep. So you can see my beautiful mess behind me. But I have a nice Jack Daniel's barrel
Ooh, yeah.
proof single barrel rye here. So that's a really nice bottle.
Yep. Did
And
somebody have like single barrel selects for it,
yep,
or do you have like it would like the tasting? Dude, that's awesome when they do that.
yep,
It's just so nice. Yeah.
yep. And these go for about like $65, I think.
Well worth it.
They had a special edition rye that was barrel proof a couple years back, and it was one of the best bourbons, whiskeys, general I've ever had. So these are pretty good. I don't know if they're at the level to that last bottle. It's hard to compare because it's been years since I had it, but for $65, it's definitely a winner. So if you find it, definitely get it.
Yeah, I can remember 5 or 6 years ago. It had to be at least 5 or 6 years ago now. My sister was living in Maine. She's in the southern part of Maine, and we drive over. You go through New Hampshire, and they have the New Hampshire Liquor Authority, and they have a deal with them where they get all of these barrel selects, and you walk into their stores, and they'll have a wall where they have individual bottles. They'll have 5 or 6 of each one, but they have like 20 or 30 different barrels worth, and each one has tasting notes. So you can go in there and say, hey, I like this flavor, and so for me, I really like the sour apple flavors in a bourbon, and I like the caramelly flavors. So I found one that said sour apple and caramel on it. Brought it home. One of the best bottles of bourbon I've ever had, and it's not that expensive, but it's just nice. You can find those flavors and the profiles and stuff. And somebody who's got a way better nose than I do says, "Oh, this tastes like this." Cool. It's pretty cool.
Well, so last week, we recorded, and I was in a hotel, and I also had the wrong microphone selected. I think the entire stream, but hey, mistakes happen.
Mistakes happen.
But like I said, one of the fun things about there is they had the hotel I was at had its own barrel pick of a
Yeah, you said that. Yeah, you
yeah,
mentioned that. Yeah.
and
That's cool.
it was pretty good. But I asked the guy, I'm like, oh, well, how much for a bottle? It was $75, and it was just a little steep for what I was looking for. It was good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, they were only charging me like $8 or $9 a pour, so whatever. I drank it the entire
Not
trip, the
bad.
entire
Yeah.
time I was there. But when I talked with my buddy Ed DeRosa, and I asked him, I'm like, dude, what's up with these $75 of bourbon? I'm like, is that like the new $60? And he's like, yeah, basically. As we
Yep.
see Mr. Colin Sheehan in chat there. What's up, Colin? How are you doing? And yeah, so it's been kind of slow for me as far as buying bottles. I've been kind of working through what I have now. So this is probably this might be one of the last bottles I picked up. My buddy actually just texted me today though. He found a bottle of Caribou Crossing, which
Yeah,
is
you mentioned that. Yeah, you said that in chat.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's at MSRP. So I'm like, yeah, sure, pick it up. But I don't have super high hopes, but hey, the bottle looks cool, right? So,
It's all about the bottle look. But I
exactly.
know I know we're not one to sort of toot our own horns, so to speak. But are we going to mention the 25-1 that we both loved last week that wired the field at Santa Anita in a stakes race? That
I
I mean, it made
mean,
for a good day for me. That's all I'm throwing
yeah,
out
I
there.
mean, I know that set up the pick five that you had there. So
Yeah,
congratulations there.
nice little one.
And like the of course, right? You and I both talk about it, but who gets all the credit for it?
This
Caleb
guy.
Knight.
This guy, yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty good of me with Cabo Spirit, wasn't it?
Well, like, and in fairness, I think you ended up using him in your pick four or pick five, anyways, didn't you,
I
Caleb?
did. I did. I mean, I think I don't remember exactly what I said on the stream. I'm sure it was perfect, but whatever it was, I think I said basically I was going to mostly single. I think the Divine Propos. I think that was the race,
Yeah.
and Cabo Spirit Lone Speed would be like a C for me, which is pretty much how I ended up using him. Um, didn't hit it because of the horse Mark had in the Awesome Again. I'm not calling it the new name, so didn't have it because of that. But nice hit for Mark.
Nice
What
little one.
was that? That was a two horse that won that race,
That was
right?
the two
Yeah, I think
horse
that was
Yeah.
race. I
Sub
can't remember. I don't
Sandador or something like that.
sub. Yeah, I can never say the horse's name right, but yeah, sub Sandador. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I was talking, Caleb. I know you were getting here a little late, but I was talking to Mark before the stream, as I kind of set up our kind of like topic for the night here in this late pick five here, or not, it's not really the late pick five. This is an all stakes pick five here, starting in race six. And it's the start of the turf pick three, so we're gonna be able to cover the turf pick three as well. So if the pick five's not your fancy and you want to play something a little bit smaller, the pick three, well, although it's a high minimum, if you get a single in there, you can keep tickets pretty reasonable. I thought this sequence was, to quote our good friend Chase, a son of a bitch. I looked at this first race, Caleb, and I think I did what you did, and I just ended up skipping it because I'm like, I can't. I just there's too many ways I can go here, and I can't. And then I just kind of felt like every single race there was just like horses upon horses upon horses that all looked the same. So I'm really curious. I know Mark and I kind of talked through a little bit. We see a couple things, differently, like we always do. You, Caleb, tend to split the middle between us. So I'm curious where the three of us all end up in the sequence because, yeah, I thought this was a really tough one, and I think maybe the toughest race of the whole sequence might be race six, which is going to start the sequence, going to start the turf pick three. It's the Woodford. It's a grade two turf sprint. We're going 5.5 furlongs on the turf here. And we're oversubscribed. We got a full field of 12. We got a couple AEs. We got three AEs to show for it. And your morning line favorite is going to be the 8 Super Quest here for Mark Cassie and Jose Ortiz. He's going to be 7-2. And you kind of got a flat board because you got 7-2 here on Super Quest. You got 4-1 on Our Shot, 9-2 on No Balls, 5-1 on No Nate Hudson, 6-1 on Arzak, and then you get double digits on everybody else. And I don't know. I think you got a lot of horses in here that actually have a shot. So, Mark, I'll let you go first. Where did you kind of land here?
Yeah, I know you guys mentioned that you thought this was a super hard race. It's one of those races where if you keep looking at it, you keep finding other horses. You're like, oh, I can see something to like there. I can see something to like there. But I kept it pretty simple here, and I'm only going to be using two horses in this race. And kind of keeping my ticket pretty skinny. And the aforementioned Super Quest is one of those horses. In the Harvey pack, he had did not have the best trips. He kind of got bumped at the break and wasn't able to kind of get out and get loose like he likes to. But if he's able to get out of the gate, get on the front end and get comfortable, he's very, very dangerous going this 5.5 furlong trip. And he's perfect going, across it at Keeneland. He won a nice allowance race, fall of last year. So, I think him loose on the front end is very dangerous in this field. And the only other horse that I really want to use is No Balls, the 6 horse, who obviously was very good to me in the Breeders' Cup last year. But if you look how No Balls has historically been campaigned, I would imagine Ravelli is doing the same thing he did last year, where he is, gets him a couple warm up races, and then kind of turns the screws right before the Breeders' Cup, and it was really kind of thinking about the Breeders' Cup as the target race for the year. I know he was scratched a couple times up at Saratoga. I think everybody kind of knew in that race that he is going to need a race, and he tossed a clunker, and then he ran him back in the turf sprint at Kentucky Downs, where I just, I don't know if it was a little too far. I don't know if he just didn't handle the going. Didn't run a terrible race, and he lost to Cogburn, who is arguably the best turf sprinter. I don't know, at least in the United States, arguably one of the better couple in the world right now. And Cogburn's not here, so I think No Balls is a pretty major player in this race, and this is kind of where I expect to see him put one together, sort of like he did in the DeHaas last year at Colonial. I expect him to take a little bit of a step forward, and kind of as Ravelli starts kind of turning the screws. So I think No Balls and Super Quest are your two most likely winners, and they're the only two horses I'm going to use because I need to spread other places in this sequence.
Caleb, where did you land?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that this is, by and large, the toughest race for me in the sequence, and what is already what I think is a pretty tough sequence. Honestly, I looked at this race for 20 or 30 minutes last night and ended up with almost every horse circled or with a question mark beside him or scratched out and then erased and then circled again. And I don't know. I don't have a clue in this race. If I had the bankroll, I would absolutely go all in this race. And I know that's a crazy thing in this sequence, given how hard it is. So I probably won't be able to do that. But it's the kind of race that might actually preclude me from actually playing the sequence because I find it that unapproachable. I mean, if you're a time form US, FIGS user, essentially every horse in here runs something between 118 and a 122. I mean, there's a couple that maybe aren't quite that fast. I mean, like the 1 and the 2 horse would need to, take a slight step forward. But even they have some, further back races that aren't that far off and they're drawn well for a turf sprint. So truthfully, I think it's just an absolute, just mind-boggling race. I was looking for almost gimmicky angles, like who is the horse for course who loves Keeneland, or who is the trainer that always points to Keeneland, making me look at somebody like None Hudson. But I mean, I don't really think this horse is very good. But, again, there's horses in here that I wouldn't want to bet at their price. So maybe what I'll end up doing is just using anyone that I think is a relatively fair value. I like Super Quest in here, and I like No Balls to a lesser extent. But I don't think either of them should be 7-2 or 9-2 in this field. So given how I approach this horizontally, I might be 8 deep and leave off the top, 4 choices or something to that effect. So for me, I think it's very difficult. No Balls I'll talk about a little bit. I just need to see more from him before I can bet him at 9-2. He was. It's hard to say he was campaigned this way last year when he had like 8 or 9 starts at this point, including some wins. So I think he's maybe just not the same horse he was before. I think he does have 2 excuses, so we're not sure yet. But if he doesn't win this one, then I think he's done for me. This is kind of the make or break race because he should get this trip and he should beat this field if he's half the horse he was in the fall of last year. But then you have horses like, our shot at 4-1 is fine. I mean, you have, None Hudson at 5-1 is too short, but then you have horses like Coppola at 20-1 in a race that isn't loaded with early speed. And yeah, the Kentucky Downs race was poor, but some horses don't like Kentucky Downs, and you kind of ignore that one. And on figures and form, this horse fits. I mean, you have Arzak, who has been very good. You have Axthelm, who got really good out of nowhere in his last 2 starts. Maybe he freaked the Kentucky Downs, but to me, there's just way too many horses that are going to be 10-1 for me to go with the 7-2 and 9-2. So I will be spread here and covering a lot of the outside contenders because I think this is a wide open race.
By the way, that line on Coppola is an absolute joke. There's no way you get even half that. He's gonna be 8-1. Like, there's just no way you get 20-1 on that horse. It's a terrible line. It's Keeneland. Keeneland's notorious for terrible lines. But I understand where your approach is coming from. I don't hate it at all. But
I don't think you're gonna play. I think you're right.
Yeah. If you're gonna play with a pick 5 with that approach, I just need to know who the favorite is so I can single them. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, do you think our Super Quest goes off the favorite in this race?
I think so, yeah.
Over No Balls, you think so?
I think he goes off the favorite. I think No Balls goes off second choice. I think they have that fairly right on the morning lines. I think somebody like None Hudson probably drifts up, but not a lot. And but then there's a lot of horses like Our Shot. Like, why is Our Shot 4-1 on the morning line? A horse that hasn't won since in a year and just seems to just not really get it done. Like, there's a lot of those kind of things that I kind of head scratching here. I think that the lines are very bad.
Yeah, I had a hard time with this one. I mean, the horse I'm probably most interested in this spot is actually the 2 Axthelm. And I think, I'm kind of looking at recency here. I just think that of the horses right now in this race, he's probably the one going the best right now. Now, I know Matthew DeSantis at some point had talked about how these Kentucky Downs races take a lot out of horses, and sometimes them shipping out or them going elsewhere after those Kentucky Downs races, maybe they're not the same horse. There's regression, so maybe I'm a little bit a little bit more cautious on that. But I see 15-1 on the morning line, which I mean, sure, I'll take it. This horse finished third to Cogburn last time out, who would be 5-2, 2-1, 9-5 in this race. So
4-5.
yeah, I like Axhelm here as kind of like the price play, I guess. And then yeah, I'm going back to the Ravelli. Well, I think of the 2 Ravelli horses, I do prefer No Balls, but and you kind of mentioned, both of you guys mentioned all the reasons, but the one timer is no slouch. I know you have to kind of go back to find a couple of like good figs for this horse, but at the end of 2020 and the end of 2022 and starting the 2023 season, I mean, he was rattling off some nice wins there. Won a nice race at Ellis Park, and I was actually pretty bullish on him in the Kentucky Downs race, the turf sprint, the Grade 2, and then I don't know what Jared Loveberry was doing. I don't know necessarily if being 2.25 lengths off at second call, 3.25 lengths at first call was the plan with him in that race. When you kind of have to go pretty far back to find a time when he was that far back. So if E.T. Baird stays aboard here, I mean, E.T. Baird, you see he's got 6 total mounts this year, and all of them I think are 4-layer Ravelli, and he generally only rides when he's got a shot to win. So not to say that Corrales by any means is a slouch, and he gets tons of good Ravelli mounts as well. So I just think that 15-1 that he might get a little lost on the board. And I think from a value perspective might be worth it. I think to your point, Caleb, you do have to go kind of far back to find like something probably in time form that's like in the 115 to 120 range, if he's even run something that fast. But I think on his day, if he gets the right trip, I think he can be dangerous. I mean, I was super bullish on him going into the juvenile turf sprint, because he had won a really nice race at Santa Anita. There was like a listed stakes or something, and he just like blew the doors off of a bunch of horses in that race. So there's definitely talent there. Obviously, he's a little bit. He's going to be the other Ravelli, but I thought he was pretty interesting here at what's going to be a pretty big price. So I like one timer. I like Axthelm. I think of the short prices. I like No Balls, and you'd mentioned Arzak. I think Arzak might be kind of horse for course type angle here. He's 2 for 2 here at Keeneland. He won this race last year, and 6-1 on the morning line seems about like what I would probably want, somewhere like in that 5 to 6-1 range for a horse like Arzak. And I do think that this race is flatter than they kind of agree with you, Caleb. I think the race is probably a little flatter than it kind of suggests from the morning line. because I think you also have horses heck, the 11 Gear Jockey, who basically hasn't run a bad race at Keeneland, and I know he's 7 now at this point. He's kind of been really lightly raced the last couple of years, but he's one who ran a pretty good race in this race. I mean, going back 2 years, but I don't know. Maybe this is just another horse that just likes Keeneland, and maybe you look at some of the horses that he was racing against that he got beat by here. Like, I don't know, Golden Pal and Johnny Unleashed, one of our favorite horses, Caleb.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, like you kind of said, Caleb, you kind of start looking and you start digging in on a lot of these horses. I think you could make a case for almost any of them at this point, which makes it a great betting race. But man, for something like a pick 5, I think makes it pretty difficult. So I kind of got 4 horses. I'm going to use the 1, the 2, the 6, and the 10 in varying degrees here. So anybody else that we didn't talk about in this race that you guys want to briefly mention?
Anybody give XY Speed the 12 a little bit of a look? I mean, I realize he's 8 now, and maybe his best days are a little bit behind him. But and probably also not the best position draw, and this is a bit up in class. But his speed figures fit, and he's ripped off 3 in a row back in the spring down at Gulfstream. Gets a kind of a warm up race in a black type at Monmouth, and in lands here. And I thought a horse that's 12-1 who has some speed figures that fit in here, has some races that do fit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a flat race, like I said, so I'm not going to discount a horse like that. I think 12-1's a silly price. I think he's going to be 30-1, and I think.
That's what I
meant.
He
should be. I think he should be.
He should be like 25 or 30. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's going a little bit the wrong way in his form cycle, and I think he's a horse that really only shows up with his best at Gulfstream. So I'm a little bit more against him, I think, but. But he has races in his 38 career starts that would win this race. I mean, it didn't come up all that difficult this year. I mean, there's no Cogburn, there's no oh God, what's the award horse that you like? He's like 19 years old now.
He would no. Bound for
yeah,
Norbert.
but whatever. There's no
Bound for Norbert wouldn't be competitive in this field though. So
yeah, no, but back in his day, I mean, but
back in his day,
I don't know. I mean, to me, XY Speed. At 25-1, I give him a shot, but I don't think he realistically from that post and working out a trip. I think it'd be tough.
I was gonna say, didn't Bound for Nowhere just run?
He did at Churchill.
Oh yeah, he's still working. No,
he
Kentucky
won.
Downs. He ran at Kentucky
Or sorry,
Downs.
was it Kentucky Downs? He just had a win.
He
I
won
think he
at
lost
Churchill,
Kentucky Downs
yeah.
by like a nose, right?
Yeah, maybe that was Wells.
Finished 5th.
Didn't he have a win not that long ago?
Yeah, at Churchill, but it was in May.
Yeah.
So
That's recent for him.
yeah,
I mean, he runs like
He runs like twice a year.
He runs like 2 or 3 times a year. So
all right, so let's move on here. Race 7, the TCA, the Thoroughbred Club of America Stakes, Grade 2 here. Fillies and mares, 3-year-olds and up. We're gonna go 6 furlongs here on the main track. And boys, I looked at this race and I landed on the chalk. So, I landed on Brightwork. And I'm gonna want a little bit of Spirit Wind. And I didn't. I don't know. I couldn't go much further. I mean, I think you cross the line through Spirit Wind's last race, which was going. I believe it's 7 furlongs is 2 turns at Charlestown. So you kind of look at all the 1-turn races, and I mean, I don't know, horses coming in with real great form. Won that nice honorable miss at Saratoga, and Mike Smith comes in to ride, and I believe this is a horse that I made the huge mistake, then left off my ticket in the honorable miss. Was the last horse I cut off. So
5-1 too.
Yeah, that one hurt. Well, it wasn't the 5-1; it was the $8,000 that hurt, and that pick 5 that I 4 out of 5. But to save like $7 or something, I forgot what it was. But live and learn. But Yeah, I think Brightwork is kind of cut from the same cloth, right? You cross out the 2-turn races, and horse hasn't done anything wrong. Has done it on the lead, has done it just off. So I kind of think that it's going to be between the 3 and the 4 in here, and I really don't need anybody else. But Mark, how did you kind of see it?
Yeah, uh, I struggled a little in this race. I have Brightwork as a lone A. But I think the question you have to ask with Brightwork is, and Brightwork has one race speed figure wise that makes her a major player in here. And I mean, I love the story. The story is phenomenal. The whole situation at Saratoga was heartbreaking from this past summer with the paddock scratch and the whole deal there. But that there's one figure that makes her a major player, and that's that Prioress. Now she looked really, really, really good in the Prioress, and there's no other way to look at it. But good track. I don't know. Did that potentially move her up? And does she regress a little bit off from that effort? Could be the case. I think she for me is a lone A, but I think as a value proposition, she's a really hard horse to really love because she's going to be overbet because everybody knows the story and everybody thinks it's cool and everything else. Is she going to be overbet relative on her chances to win? I don't really know. The problem that I had was there was not that other horse that I really liked in here that I was like, oh, I love this story. I love this angle. This is a super interesting horse for me. So I used a couple of others. Brightwork will be lone A for me. I thought somebody like Clearly Unhinged, the one, and Josh already mentioned Spirit Wind. Another horse I thought Red Carpet Ready was a little bit interesting. Getting back on dirt, and getting back to a little bit of a cutback over where they had been campaigning her at. But it's a tough race, and I don't really love being 4 deep in a 7-horse field, So I'm still not quite sure how I end up managing it come Saturday.
Yeah, I see this race very similar to both of you guys. I do think Brightwork is by far the most likely winner. I'll push back a little bit on she only has one fig because she's only ran one time as a 3-year-old. I mean, if you're going to argue her figs from October of her 2-year-old season, competitive a month before Breeders' Cup of her 3-year-old season, I mean, that's a huge amount of development. So I don't think I'm worried about the one fig. I think she's just clearly gotten a lot better after the time off. Maybe regresses a bit in here, but could also very likely go forward. I mean, she wasn't super likely to win the Prioress off of an unplanned late scratch and then a change of plans and on the big layoff. And the fact she was still able to get it done, to me, I think that is more of a positive than negative. So I think she is the most likely winner. I think it's not that close. I don't like Clearly Unhinged at all. And I don't really trust Spirit Wind. But given what appears to be a bit of a murky pace complexion, she's definitely speed of speed. She's one that I'd probably won on 1 or 2 tickets, but I wouldn't want to spread too deep in this race because I do think Brightwork is your most likely winner. I'd have a little bit of Spirit Wind just in case she wires it, and that's probably it for me.
Anything else in this race? No? Honestly, the dirt races I don't think were as interesting. So that Turf Pick 3 might look like might be the better play. Although Caleb, you think you got all that one, so on a $3 base, that might not.
2 singles.
Yeah. The first lady here, we're going to be going a mile on the turf for fillies and mares 3-year-old and up, and we have a nice full field of 11 here. Your morning line favorite at 3-1 is Gina Romantica, 7-2 on White Beam, 9-2 on Tarawa, not to be confused with Tarnawa. And then we got 6-1 on Caleb's nemesis, Chili Flag, and Ag Bullet here, also at 6-1. And Caleb, I told Mark before the stream, I was like, yeah, I like 2 Chad Brown horses, which means that Chili Flag is going to boom me in this race. So how are you seeing this one, Caleb?
It's unbelievable that there's no pace in turf races in America, and that's 25 times as true in New York. And he keeps finding these races to put Chili Flag in where there's just a ton of speed signed on. And I don't know how this keeps happening because that doesn't happen more often than not in American turf racing. Yet Chili Flag keeps finding herself in these just dream setups and taking all of my money. And I'm quite upset about it. But I'm not going to bet her because at this point, I'd rather be stubborn than right. So, but I think she gets a beautiful setup in here. I mean, talking about the pace for a minute, AG Bullet is extremely quick. I mean, she absolutely blitzed the track at Kentucky Downs. I mean, for whatever that figure and timing is worth, given the way they time races over there, I'll leave you to make your own conclusions. But regardless, this is a horse that has just a ton of early speed. White Beam wants to be involved awful early. They finally put the right jock on Evie Jets, and they found a really bad spot, with a lot of other speed. When I was first handicapping the race, I'm like, oh, Evie Jets with Paco? Like, absolutely. And then I looked at, the outside drawn speed, and I was like, this is going to be a tough race to win on the front end. Because then you even have horses like Walkathon who, want to be somewhat forward, and Staffine who had some luck going to the front last time out. So, yeah, I mean, to me, I think there's a lot of speed in here. So I was kind of looking towards closers that were not named Chili Flag. So with that being said, I mean, I do think that Chad Brown clearly holds a strong hand in here. And, but my top pick actually went a different direction. And it's a horse I mentioned who may be involved early on the pace, actually. But do we actually get 10-1 on Walkathon? There's no way, right?
No, there's no way. That's a terrible line.
There is no way because Mark literally, when we started, he's like, you kind of got to like Walkathon on this spot too. So if Mark likes it, it's not going to be 10-1.
Yeah. I mean, coming off 3 wins, 3 different tracks, there's really, I mean, it seems to be one of those rare mares that gets really actually better as she gets older. I mean, probably in peak form here as a 5-year-old. Can do it on the pace, can do it off the pace. And, I do think she needs to be careful not to get too caught up in the pace, I think. But I tend to believe that last time, I mean, Kentucky Downs is very favoring speed pretty much most of the meet. I think that was just a savvy ride by, Hernandez, knowing he had the best horse and deciding to give her the best ride. And that's kind of all she needed. But if you look back at the prep race for that at Ellis, I mean, she was able to sit off the pace mid-pack, just, 2 lengths off and make her move. So I think she has lots of options and has enough speed to get a good position. And I think she's just in good form right now. And a lot of the others who are going to take money, I'm a little less convinced about.
Mark?
Yeah, I this race I had a really hard time with, and I kind of went around a bunch of different times and kept kind of flopping back and forth. Caleb mentioned Ag Bullet already. I think Ag Bullet is actually very interesting in here. Oftentimes you see these Cali Speed horses that ship east and don't fire, but that Kentucky Downs race was just really, really nice. And she seems like the kind that is a legit talented horse. I think there's no way you get anywhere near 6-1 on her. I would imagine she goes off. Actually, I don't know. I guess it depends on how much money some of the Chads take in here. But I thought Ag Bullet was really super interesting. And the other A I had marked down is the Euro Invader Tarawa, the 2. Dermot Weld does very well shipping to the States. Bit of a, he's a very, very kind of known commodity overseas. And I thought that Snow Ferry was a really nice race to Kerr, and the race prior to that at Leopardstown, the Meld, almost beat Diego Velasquez, who is a horse that's going to be an
I'm sorry, almost beat.
By 7 lengths.
Okay. So, sorry, I was misreading my form. But okay, I was just saying, got beat by Diego Vasquez, and if you're one of those people who is the company you keep kind of people, that's going to be a major player in the the Breeders' Cup Mile. So I thought interesting Euro, probably a horse that they're trying to figure out. Does handle the American racing? Is this one that we run in the Breeders' Cup someplace, or stay over here? But I think it's interesting to see a horse shipping in, and kind of there's a few Euros other places on here or other places on this card I'm not as interested in. This is one that I am a little interested in, but I don't really know what the board does with this one either. And then, Josh had already mentioned, already had mentioned Walkathon, who I thought was an interesting player in here. And the other horse that I thought that was a little bit of a price that's also an interesting player in here was Implicated, the 9 for Brendan Walsh, who's 20-1 on the morning line. Horse that's 3 for 4 going this trip and probably needed the last out race at Kentucky Downs off the layoff. So, I mean, I realize it wasn't that long of a layoff, but off the layoff line. So I think there's some interesting players in here. I want a little bit of coverage in this race because this is the one where I just had a really hard time with this race. I thought it was really tough.
Yeah, my top pick in here is the morning line favorite. I don't know if I'm turning into Mark, but I thought the 4 Gino Romantica, 2 for 3 at Keeneland. Obviously, I think one was going this exact trip, going the mile. Another one going a mile and 1/8. So likes the track here, and I kind of agree with you, Caleb. I think that there's a fair bit of speed in here, and I think that Gina Romantica last time out in the First Lady did get a pretty fairly brisk pace, going 23-2, 46-4, and was able to close in pretty nicely on that in winning. So, like the fact that she's got a win over this trip. Has got that P running style, so it is going to be coming from off the pace here, but. Just in case anything stupid happens, I did use the 11 white beam here.
Ugh. Ugh.
Ugh.
I'd rather use chili flag.
You'd rather use chili flag than white beam?
I would.
I don't know, man. I thought the Diana obviously was nice, but once again, I think she did get away with murder a little bit there. But the Fig came back pretty good, and does have one run here. At Keeneland, kind of finished fourth there behind Gina Romantica and Evie Jets, but maybe that was last year. Maybe the horse kind of turned a little bit of a corner here. But I will say, Caleb, the more you hate chili flag, the more I kind of feel like I'm gonna have to use at this point because if we can't all be wrong, right? Like that's just bad for business, but.
I will have chili flag on 0 of my tickets, Josh. So you do with that do with that what you will.
What about fluffy socks? You guys look at fluffy socks?
I actually did, believe it or not.
I did too.
And I haven't used fluffy socks in 4 years, and I actually think she's usable in here.
My issue with fluffy socks is the fact that she wins when she finds a soft enough field, and I think there's just way too much talent in this field. Yeah, I think if you look at how she's been campaigned her entire career, she was never an A-tier Chad Brown horse. She was always, he knew she was, talented enough to. I mean, clearly she's won some very nice races, but she was never the cream of the crop in the Chad Brown barn. I think he's got a couple in here who are much more talented, and I just don't know how she gets a setup that's advantageous enough. I think there's just way too much talent here.
Yeah, I mean, for me with fluffy socks, I don't often make this distinction, but I've always felt she was absolutely a stone cold miler and not a mile and a 16th, and certainly not a mile and an 8th kind of a horse. Yeah. And, and I think that's, she won at Pimlico, but that was over a swampy turf course and she was 3-5. So
yeah,
in general, I've always thought she was better just at a mile. If you look at her record, I mean, she doesn't win a ton, but she's got 3 of her 6 wins is at a mile, and she's been in the exacta 5 out of 6 times. The one time that she wasn't was just the race at Kentucky Downs, which is hardly like a traditional mile. So I'm almost willing to kind of say she's never missed the exacta at a mile. But with that being said, I think she gets a ton of speed in here to close into. She hasn't had that very often. She is getting a big rider upgrade from Rosario to anybody else. In this case, it's Frankie Dettori. I just think that, she would need a few others to probably not show up with their A game, would need a good trip and the pace to set up for her. But I don't think any of those things are really all that unlikely. And if you get 20-1, I mean, I don't hate her in here. I mean, she's not the most likely winner, but she'll make some of my tickets.
Yeah, I was kind of trying to highlight this. Like I said, we're going far back here, but one thing that kind of did stand out to me was I was looking at the Del Mar race that was a mile, and you look at the pace here, right? These are kind of like the Briz figures that kind of show, hey, how fast is the pace? If it's a plus, it's a fast pace. And plus 15, plus 11, pretty good. You see the fractions here: 22 and 4, 45 and 4, and she didn't get there. She lost by a head, but outside of that Gallarette where it was just an absolute bog, it was probably been her best race in the last year. So I definitely do think that getting some pace in front of her is when she's going to run her best. And actually, if you look at the Gallarette, you see the plus 18, plus 17 distinction there. So they thought that for the conditions that was a fast pace, even though it was 25 and 3, 50 and 3. So yeah, I was trying to look for like prices that in here, and I thought, and Fluffy Stocks kind of caught my eye, especially with Frankie taking them out, because the guy can still ride, as I believe has been evidence. Every once in a while you see him get on a horse and basically carry it across the finish line. So, anything else in here?
Yeah, there's actually two more horses I wanted to talk about. This is probably my favorite race of the sequence because I think there's a lot of value in here, and I actually do have some opinions. And they're actually both 20-1 in the book, which I think is probably just.
Are you going to be on special WAN as well?
Well, I was going to say, when you talked about the Euros, Mark, I kind of thought this is where you may go. Because there's new universe you can take Tarawa at 9-2 and not take special WAN at 20-1.
Yep.
Now those odds are going to get closer, but Special One beat Tarawa when they faced off in May earlier this year, and then we really bring back the same race at Leopardstown when she was second by a head to Mustarev. I can't say that.
I think, yeah.
Mustarev, whatever. I've been out of the loop, so I don't know my Euros. But regardless, this horse always shows up, and then the Kentucky Downs race, it didn't come back super fast, and it maybe looks like she didn't win by that much. But if you watch the race, I mean, nobody was closing most of the meet, especially that day on Kentucky Downs. And she looks like she was just shot out of a cannon in the stretch. I mean, she was just gobbling up the ground. I mean, a really visually impressive run. I think she looks great in here.
Yeah, I can talk about her
as well, Mark.
For all the reasons you said, Caleb. I mean, Kentucky Downs was all speed, all meat, and she was one of the few horses that I saw that made up a lot of ground. Figure came back soft, but I don't really care just because of how she did it. And I also think, sometimes, that first in the U.S. figure isn't necessarily their best effort, and it takes someone to figure it out. I think she's a really interesting player in here at a pretty big price. So, no, completely agree with you.
The one other horse I did want to talk about too is actually the number 9, Implicated. You got to sort of draw a line through the last race. She clearly just didn't handle the Kentucky Downs surface for whatever reason. But her 2 races before that at Churchill and at Woodbine were really good. I mean, after getting transferred out of the Chad Brown barn, she actually seems to have improved quite a bit. In particular with that race back at Woodbine in the Nassau. I mean, she not only did she win that race, but that was a good race. I mean, she beat Fev Rover, who, was a very accomplished Grade 1 winner, has beaten an Italian, just lost to Moira by a head the next time out in the Grade 1. Also in that race was Full Count Felicia, who came back to wire the Canadian at some huge price, I think. No, it wasn't a huge price, but she did wire the Canadian. They ran 1-2, her and Millie Girl. But I mean, she then exited that race to wire the EP Taylor at a nice price. But at any rate, she's a nice horse. That's a good race, and that's a key race. A lot of horses have come back to run well out of that race. So I think that if you draw a line for the Kentucky Down race, low profile connections with Juan Machado getting up, but he's excellent. Went up for Brendan Walsh. I think this horse gets a pace setup, and not one I would overlook at a big price.
Yeah, I think I mentioned the horse really quickly, but
I know you mentioned her in passing.
Of any horse that probably sits the golden trip. I mean, you have a lot of these horses that want to be a little further back and are much more closers. Implicated is going to be that horse that's going to sit just off the pace and is kind of the one horse that inherits that trip. You have the speedballs on the front end, and then this one sits just back. Going to get first run, and I think is very, very extremely interesting for all the reasons you mentioned here. And there was a couple month break there, before that Kentucky Downs race, and you're getting a little bit more of a normal setup here. So I think a very, very interesting player here.
All right. let's move on to race 9 and just Caleb's favorite types of races. 2-year-old stakes races, especially route races after, most of these horses have only gone around one turn. So
Do you think they should have a 2-year-old turf marathon stakes? I think they should.
Yes, they should.
what, just to mess with you even more or what?
Just to two negatives make a positive.
It actually, I'm actually surprised that they don't run a 2-year-old sprint. Like, why not? Why is it
A turf
why,
sprint, you mean?
No, a dirt sprint in the Breeders' Cup rather.
Oh, in the Breeders' Cup, yeah.
Yeah. They run the juvenile, but it's what is it, a mile or mile and 16th usually. I'm surprised they don't run like a 6 furlong 2-year-old race. I don't know. Especially with, we all saw the stallion registry. There's going to be a lot of horses that are going to have a hard time getting anything more than 6 furlongs coming out of that stallion crop. So,
looking at you, Timberlake.
oh yeah, and Timberlake. God, I can't believe that, dude. I don't know. I'm not going to say too much because I'm sure I don't know what I'm fucking talking about. But yeah, I don't know, man. That stallion registry was something else. Who is breeding 200 mares to Papa Cap? Please, somebody tell me.
West Point. Yeah.
Golly, 200 mares to Papa Cap. I would have never guessed it. But mile and 16th here, Breeders' Cup Futurity, Grade 1. 2-year-olds going a mile and 16th on the main track.
There's no cup in there, Josh. It's just the Breeders' Futurity.
Oh, Breeders' Futurity. Whatever. 8-5 on the 1 Ferocious. 3-1 on East Avenue. 9-2 Dapper Moon. 8-1 on Tenacious Leader. And then you get double digits on everybody else. Mark, I'll let you talk later about Ferocious because I know you love yourself an 8-5 morning line horse. But I actually thought the most interesting horse to me in this race was actually the 9 Tenacious Leader. Ran in that with anticipation, ran pretty well, ran second by a neck there to Zulu Kingdom. And I don't know, I thought the dirt race that obviously was washed off the dirt was probably a better race. Won pretty impressively, going, winning by 4 3/4 lengths there to, I believe it was Clock Tower, who came back to win next time out. And yeah, you see the breeding, and probably is okay on either surface, but not this time with curling on the bottom. You're thinking this horse wants to go long on the dirt. So yeah, I like to change back to dirt. I think is kind of has got tactical speed. Likes to be forwardly placed. You get Florent and Giroux aboard, which doesn't inspire the most confidence in me. But I thought at the morning line odds at 8-1, I thought this is a really interesting horse because this is a horse that it's you can't say it for many of these other horses, is a horse that can get the distance. So I thought the 9 Tenacious Leader made a ton of sense in here. Obviously, the 1 Ferocious makes a bunch of sense with that second, the Hopeful, but I think you do have a little bit more question about the distance because Flatter, generally is more of a miler or less. But I guess mile and 16 should be fine. I think it's got obviously the speed figures, it's got the work pattern. Everything is pointing that this horse is good to go. So I have a hard time looking past Ferocious in the spot, but I'm trying to keep my ticket a little bit reasonable. So those are the only 2 horses I'm going to use. Caleb, where did you land?
Yeah, if the turf sprint was the worst race in the sequence, or the hardest race in the sequence, this is the worst race in the sequence, and easily the second hardest for me. I didn't know what to do in this race. I gave a look to Tenacious Leader, and honestly, if any other jockey was aboard, I think I'd be with you. That's my top pick. I just have such little confidence in Flo, and not just in general, but the message that it sends when Pletcher puts Flo up. I don't know what the stats are, but just anecdotally, it feels like it's not great. So, for me, that really bothers me quite a bit. I have a hard time a little bit with Flo, but otherwise, I agree with you, Josh. The horse does look pretty good. with Keeneland, a mile and a 16th, you got the short stretch. So I'm trying to take horses that I think will be forward, kind of against my usual plan of taking horses that can pass others. Because to me, it sort of seems like this race either has horses that want to be very far forward or horses that are going to be very far back. Not a whole lot of pressers I could find, with the exception of maybe Tenacious Leader. Another reason why I kind of did agree with you on that horse, Josh. But for me, I guess I ended up on two horses that I think are, fine. It's not like I can make a strong case for anybody here. East Avenue, 3-1, not a great price, but this horse absolutely blew the doors off that field in the debut. Word was out, went off 6-2, ran away and hit at Ellis Park. Remains to be seen kind of what was behind him in that race. We haven't really seen, a lot of runbacks from that. The ones that haven't been very good. So I do think there's reasons to be a little skeptical, but he did win by 8 lengths. So how much you care about that is, a bit subjective, I think. And then I looked a little bit at number 10, Dapper Moon, who really improved a lot going from 6 to 7 furlongs. Was a lot more professional, got out of the gate a lot better, and came out with a pretty nice race at Saratoga, getting a pretty wide trip the whole way. That's one I think was very professional in that effort. There was a couple of pretty big hype horses in that race that he beat. I'm not really sure if they're going to end up being anything or not, but I thought that was a pretty impressive race for a guy that knows how to get long shots home in these big spots for Dallas Stewart. So I thought Dapper Moon and East Avenue both look pretty good, but again, there's a lot of ways you can go in here. So I have no issue with most of the horses, with the exception of a handful.
Can you imagine having a horse named East Avenue and not debuting at Saratoga? I don't. How much more can you screw up? It literally runs by the track. Anyways, now this is a race where if I am playing the pick 5, I will ABC buy this race. I want to have all of these horses covered. This race is just, to me, it's impossible. I don't understand why Ferocious is 8-5 in the morning line when there's like 4 or 5 other horses that have effectively run the same figures. I realize that the horse ran a really nice Hopeful. I understand, the reasons coming out of that race that it looked like, the horse needed a little bit more distance and is getting it here. The pedigree says so. Sure, I get all those reasons, but I think to the points Josh brought up, is this really the distance that you want, or is this going to end up being more of a miler? East Ave makes all the sense in the world. The only really horse that I thought, and I have kind of as towards the front end of my ticket here that we haven't talked about, is the 6 horse Filoso, who's a City of Light, Bodemeister on the bottom end. Mile and 16 should be fine for that pedigree. Second out effort was much, much improved, and this is a horse that can pass other horses. I do think it's interesting in this race to see which jockeys shipped down and which didn't. Obviously Arad doesn't appear to have shipped down for this, and neither did Dylan Davis. So I don't know, maybe that means that Filoso is not really that live and I'm making things up. But, I think that's the only one that we haven't mentioned that I liked and wanted towards the front end of my tickets. But this kind of race is just impossible. You have tons of maiden breakers last out. And I just think these are really hard races.
Look, Dylan Davis had a great Saratoga meet, but everyone knows he makes his money at Aqueduct. All right, that man's not going to leave Aqueduct for anything. All right.
He hurt me today there, so he is, he's booming me. So,
tough race.
There's one horse that I didn't know. I was curious if you guys gave the 11 a look at all. Ready for
Yes,
peace.
I did. I was going to mention the horse if nobody else did, but I think a really interesting horse that getting over to dirt. I wonder if this is, and I've talked about this before, these sort of 2-year-olds that they start on turf because they can get longer distances at a younger age, and then they move over to dirt as the year goes along, as these longer dirt races sort of appear. You're getting Jose Ortiz, who is, I guess he's a Kentucky jock now, so he's picking this mount up, and I thought, I thought a really interesting horse. The pedigree, top and bottom, seems to be the kind of pedigree that should handle dirt, so I thought More Ready for Peace was really interesting in here.
He's 30-1. Take your shot. He's not for me. I don't. he's just not fast enough. But and that's a terrible post for this distance. But yeah, 30-1, take your shot.
Yeah, I'm like honestly, it's just like one of those things where you start kind of like piecing things together. Like, I mean, Jose for the most part, like Mark kind of jokingly said, he's a Kentucky jock now, but I mean, he's been staying in Kentucky, I think, this summer, and um, I mean, frankly, he's probably top two, three jock there. So the fact that he kind of stays on this one, especially like I said, like we talked about, Todd Pletcher calling flow. I mean, he couldn't have convinced Jose to jump on over for this one. I don't know. That kind of made me kind of look at it, and then obviously More Than Ready can run on dirt or turf. Warfront definitely on the bottom, more of I think a turfy pedigree. The Brisnet breeding figures show a little bit more of a turfy pedigree, but I think Mile in the Dirt hits this horse just square in between the eyes. So I thought. Yeah, the mile and 16th was kind of interesting, but yeah, I do think it's kind of a tough post. So and it hasn't run on dirt yet. So, but
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, Josh. I mean, from what I see, 0 for 9 with flow up for Todd in the past 2 years. But Johnny V's here, and Johnny V's not riding the Pletcher. So I don't know. There's a bunch of sort of head scratching, jockey things here. But again, it really maybe it comes down to connections, want a certain jock, or what their plans are for the horse down the road.
I would be remiss if I didn't talk briefly about the lone E8 in this race.
I looked at him.
I mean, he won the last race by 14 lengths. Like, I don't know. Like the speed figure on Brisnet did not come back very fast, so I don't know what he beat, but I don't know, man.
It's in the conversation on time form. I mean, it's not fast enough to win, but it's only 4 or 5 points off.
Yeah,
these are 2-year-olds who can improve 10 points race to race, and that's not abnormal. So
but I think to Caleb's point, I think he kind of mentioned it. East Avenue obviously showed some speed, or showed speed, won by open lengths, but outside of East Avenue and Optical, there's just not a whole lot of like speed, which is kind of rare for this type of race. So I don't know. I think it's one that you have to consider just based off of the possible pace scenario in this race. So let's move on here to the last race, race 10 here, the Coolmore Turf Mile, Grade 1, going a mile on the turf. And your morning line favorite is former fake Chad, maybe now real Chad, number 9, Carl Spackler, at 2-1. You get 3-1 on More Than Looks, 4-1 on Kikuli, 6-1 on Mountain Bear, 8-1 on Talk of the Nation, and then you got double digits on everyone else. Yeah, I mean, Carl Spackler, like, it seemed like he was kind of only beating up kind of candy ass people, but I think he's kind of started to back up some of maybe he heard the allegations that we had against him at certain points last year, but yeah, I think he's definitely top in this race. I had a hard time kind of looking at anybody else in here, especially like the other short prices. I mean, the 3 More Than Looks. I mean, just I don't know. It wasn't for me. I guess ended up only got beat by 3.5 lengths. I guess by Carl Spackler last time out. I mean, I don't really, just not interested in here. Just looking at the matchup. The two is coming over from overseas. I mean, it was basically only won a maiden, and yeah, I just wasn't for me either. The only other horse I kind of looked at was the one Mountain Bear, who ran second in the BC Juvenile Turf last year, hasn't won since then. But I think we talked about Mutasarev earlier, who is a pretty damn good horse. Ran second at Diego Velasquez by a length and a half, not 7 lengths like your horse, Mark. And Mountain Bear was third by I think a head in that race. So I think he's been keeping pretty good company, and I like the fact that Aiden shipped the jock over for this horse. So you see Christopher Hayes coming over for this. So I thought Mountain Bear was probably the only other horse I kind of wanted to use in this spot. But Mark, I'm curious, where did you land?
Yeah, I think my top choice in Lone is the former fake Chad known as Carl Spackler, who is kind of gotten pretty decent, it seems like. I mean, I think there was a point in time where you looked at his speed figures and you looked at who he was beating up on and you just sort of head scratched and whatever sometimes. But, he's been pretty good, and he's a Lope de Vega that seems to kind of be improving with age, which is not the norm. I wanted no part of the Euros in here. I just had way too many question marks, and this just, I understand where you're going with Mountain Bear, and why you're landing there, and I do like to see, a trainer, Aiden shipping over, a jock that he knows or knows the horse well. But this doesn't feel like the kind of race where these just don't feel like the good Euros that you want to see shipping over, where there's a lot of upside. These are both horses that have kind of struggled to win in what feels like some fairly soft spots. And I don't necessarily know why shipping to Keeneland into a grade 1 is going to move them up a ton. So after Carl Spackler, I had a really hard time in this race. And I think the only other horse that I had 2 other horses. One of them is, the 3-horse More Than Looks, who, has to kind of make up for a couple of subpar performances, mainly that effort in the, got beaten by, needs to turn the tide on Carl Spackler from the 4-star Dave. And the other horse I was a little bit interested in was the other Chad, which is the 8-horse Spirit of St. Louis. I realize this horse has been predominantly campaigned against New York breds, and yes, it's a New York bred in the open division, but the one race in the open division, yes, it was at the Duct in April. I get it. But, was a winning effort versus open company. So this is a horse that can jump up, and I didn't feel like or should step up for, against open company. And the speed figures say that Spirit of St. Louis at 15-1 is not that much slower than anybody else in this race. So, I want predominantly Carl Spackler, a little bit of Spirit of St. Louis, and a little bit of More Than Looks.
Yeah, I am fully Team USA in this race. I'm not a big fan of the European shippers in this one. My read on, and I haven't read any articles, so if you have, maybe you know more than I do, but my read on the Christopher Hayes is shipping over for this horse is actually that he came over to ride Tarawa. He's ridden that horse in the previous race, in the First Lady. He's ridden her in her last 8 or 10 starts. I mean, this is his horse. He rides for Dermot Weld a lot more often than he rides for Aiden O'Brien. I don't know how he ended up on this horse last time for Aiden. I don't think it's going to be a routine thing. I think he's fine that he's on her, but to me, I think 6-1, still maybe a little bit short. I'm not a huge fan of Diego Velasquez, to be honest. I think he's fine, but I'm not really a big fan. And I just think the Americans in this race are quite good. I think, as much as it kills me to say it, Carl Spackler is very good. Whatever happened from 3 to 4, I mean, he's really finally put it all together, and is the rare Lope de Vega horse who has continued to get better and better with age. And I mean, his Kelso and then 4-star Dave were both outstanding races. His 4-star Dave, one of the fastest races I think we've seen on turf this year. I do also like More Than Looks, who had every right to need that race off the huge layoff. I don't think 3-1 is the right price there. I think Carl Spackler should be 3-2, 7-5. And, maybe More Than Looks can be 7-2, but at 2-1 and 3-1, I think that's way closer than I would probably make them. But that being said, I do recognize More Than Looks, should improve second off the layoff. Did have a bit of a trip in the 4-star Dave, a little bit rank. I mean, tossed his head. Should be a little bit tighter here, a little more prepared, getting that start out of the way. And then the other horse that I can't believe I'm actually saying I'm going back to the well with, and I can't actually believe Josh didn't go back to the well with, is number 6, Talk of the Nation.
Nope, not doing it.
But when I look at the race, I just don't see really any speed in here. Not really. I mean, yeah, there's Spirit of St. Louis, who might be okay if this was a 5-horse race in New York, but these aren't New York breds, and the Danger's Hour was literally still a New York bred race, even if it wasn't. I mean, it was all New York bred horses basically. Dakota Gold and Spirit of St. Louis and City Man. It was the usual suspects, regardless of the title. Maybe with Saya she goes, but or he goes, but I tend to think not. Talk of the Nation gets, I won't say a jockey upgrade, but a jockey switch that I love. I mean, going from a guy who very rarely puts horses on the lead in Irad Ortiz to one of the best front riding riders in the country, I think, in Johnny Velasquez. I'd love to see an aggressive ride here. His ride in the Mint Million was pretty criminal, taking this horse off the pace on a day when you had to be forward. 2 back in the Arlington Million. I mean, 1.25 miles is just way too far. The horse doesn't want to go this far, but back to a mile with controlling speed in here. When he had this setup, against Carl Spackler, back in May at Churchill on the Derby undercard, he only beaten ahead. And Carl Spackler has since to go on and improve quite a bit. Maybe Talk of the Nation hasn't improved quite as much, but I do think he hasn't also been put in the right positions or gotten the right trips to really see. I think at 8-1, it's a fair enough price where I'll take a shot, but I do concede that the race most likely goes through Carl Spackler.
I feel like I need to dig out some old Caleb clips talking about Johnny Velasquez being old and washed up to, throw out right now.
I mean, he comes in.
It's not JJ.
You sure it's not Castellano you're thinking of?
Well, he's broken, so.
Yeah, I looked at Talk of the Nation and I was like, not today, my friend. Not today. But I do think with the pace scenario, he definitely made me think for a little bit, especially like you said with the jock change. I'm curious what like a horse like the 5 Noises Off kind of does. He's kind of gone back and forth between being on the lead and off the lead, so I just don't think that the pace scenario is very clear in this race, because you don't have an absolute like need the lead type in here, and even though Carl Spackler is not like a leader necessarily, I mean he's been forward every time, so I think that even the slow pace just helps him either way.
So Josh, I got to ask, because this seems like a U horse. I know you mentioned Keeneland horses. No look at Running Bee in here.
I absolutely looked at Running Bee.
Okay, because I know that's a horse that owes you money and a horse that loves some Keeneland, and you're gonna get your price.
Yeah, I did look at Running Bee, and I tried to make a case there. Obviously, loves Keeneland, is 2 for 2 here, but I mean, we just beat one fake Chad allegation. I don't know if I can beat 2, in the same spot. Although, I mean, he was campaigning. I mean,
wins races though. That's the thing.
But look at how many times do you see Gulfstream, Tampa, Pimlico, Monmouth, Chad Brown horse come and win a race at Saratoga,
and Flo is up.
Yeah, I mean, this is...
You're going to play the Flo Daily Double with Tenacious Leader and Running Bee?
Oh, dude, wouldn't that be the most Keeneland thing ever, though? That's just the most Keeneland thing ever. Like, just like you get absolutely bounced in the pick 5 by just 2 horses that just absolutely in no way, shape, or form were you going to have back-to-back. And it's like, you go quadruple B in the pick 5 for 12,000 or something, like just something insane.
Oh no! If those 2 win, it'll pay a lot more than 12,000.
Yeah, but seriously, I did look at Running Bee, and I just couldn't get there. I don't know if it's so. I think maybe if Carl Spackler wasn't in this race, right, and your morning line favorite was like the 3, More Than Looks, who I don't think all that much of, then absolutely I think a horse like Running Bee makes a ton of sense. I just think that much. I think of Carl Spackler, I kind of have a hard time taking a short price on a horse that I kind of agree with Caleb is going to be 6-5, 7-5 probably in this race. Taking him with Well, I mean, I guess you are going to get your price though, so maybe it's not that bad. But yeah, I don't know. I thought that a lot of things would have to go Running Bee's way, but was one I definitely looked at. That I believe this was I was looking at Running Bee's PPs when I messaged you while the sequence, because
Okay. Okay.
I was like trying to make all kinds of cases for horses in this spot. So anything else on this race? This might be a record.
I mean, big fields too. And we got through it pretty quick.
I know.
Yeah. Well, in all fairness, you joined a little late, and we didn't let you talk about every single horse in the turf sprint that like you wanted to, since you were going to hit the all button there. But
We can go back.
you guys, did you guys look at the rest of the card at all? Mark,
I haven't
did you?
yet.
No?
I
No, I
haven't.
haven't
I haven't
either.
gotten into it yet. I'm paying too much attention to the Santa Anita Pick 6 carryover for tomorrow, and trying to get a BC seat without spending too much money on it. So
Yeah. Seats are filling up fast, apparently.
they went on sale today. So yep.
Yeah. So I did mention, Caleb, that Mark and I'm planning on drinking a lot of Del Margaritas with Mark. So you'll probably have to wait till day 2 when you're out of it. But if you're out of it,
Or
let me say,
I have lots of Del Margaritas. I mispunched my BCBC bet. And I
and
win the
profit.
contest.
Are there any Bilmont firsters in the BCBC races?
Yeah, I think he has one in the classic. In the middle of the day for some fucking reason.
The classic. Oh God, that race is just.
So Caleb, I do have to report the unfortunate that you are no longer under contract on your house, correct?
So the house I was under contract, I am no longer under contract. I am under contract for a new house.
Oh, hey! I hit you with the loser, but let's go. There you go, man. Well, good.
Yeah.
Glad to hear. So
Yeah, ironically enough, it's a house I viewed the first day I was in Denver, and didn't want to live in that area because it was too far from town. And I've now hit the point where I just need to live somewhere, and I'll deal with the rest of it.
it's a beautiful house. It's a beautiful
Yeah, it was
house.
a
I
really
think
nice house.
it's just it was just like are we ready for suburban Caleb? And I think the answer is we're just not ready for homeless Caleb.
Yeah,
So-
that is the answer. I
But
can't
no,
keep
it's-
staying here with Adele and Marcus Mumford on the wall.
Yeah. No, it was a great house. It just it's Caleb will just you're just gonna have to hit up the wine moms and other stuff early. That's fine. You'll be fine, dude. Mark, what do you got going on this weekend?
I don't really know. I'm doing some beekeeping stuff and yard stuff on Saturday. Playing some disc golf on Sunday. I'll be up in Burlington. We're leaf peeping season, so Smugs is fun to play then. And I might play around with some things. Again, I had mentioned I'm still trying to BCBC qualify before I have to buy in. So it'd be nice if I could get in, this weekend or next. After that, I'll probably just have to spend the money. And yeah, taking some stabs, looking at some stuff. Obviously, you're getting a spot where there's actually some decent racing. You got Santa Anita going, you got Keeneland going, and you got Aqueduct. So some really good racing products, big competitive fields, and some stuff that's fun to play around with. So I'll take a look at probably all of those cards and find a few spots that I can take a stab at.
And Caleb's under contract, which means DGen Caleb might come out this weekend.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. This is actually one of my favorite times of the year to play tournaments, just because you get such a good selection of tracks with Keeneland, New York, and Santa Anita that you can generally minimize the amount of absolute bullshit Gulfstream Park, $5,000 claimers or
Laurel, Monmouth,
or off the turf races or whatever else. So it's a good time for tournament. So I might jump in a couple of contests, maybe some cash feeders, something like that. But yeah, it should be fun.
You should hop in
Nice.
another BCBC. You have 2 seats.
Yeah.
or you can sell Mark the other seat at a discount and just pocket the cash.
That is also valid. You just got to find
is
where the
true.
Bilmont firsters are. That's all.
That's what
right.
Ryder Dave did, right? Didn't he win half a seat or a full seat or something?
He won half a seat, and
Yeah.
sold it. Yep, he sold it for face. So
Yeah, and so I have a game night on Saturday, so I'll be around, but then I'll be playing some board games, and I have dude, I don't know how Caleb. I think we've talked about this in our private chat. I don't know how people go in the office. Like I don't remember how we did this every day.
Why do you think
I
I'm late for the stream like all the time now? It's like I'm rushing. There's traffic. I'm tired. I have to like scarf down food. Like it's so much. It's so hard.
Last week I was in work training for like the entire week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then this week I had a vendor in town Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we have our like quarterly in person everyone come in into the office meeting on Friday. So I'm just like I don't know, man. Like and like I used to just drive to work, which was like a 20-minute drive, 25-minute drive. Now I'm taking the train, which takes me like door to door like an hour and a half. You know, hour and 20 minutes usually. I usually leave here around 7:40. I get to the office around 9. So like it's wild, man. Like I don't know how people like do this every day. Like woof. But that's going to do it for us. Obviously, you can check us out at onthewronglead.com, at wrong_lead on Twitter. I'm at Cherry Drank. Mark is at Two Turns. Caleb is at Caleb WVU. Uh, if you want to hear about Friday's card, we did a preview of the Turf Pick 3 on Keeneland's Friday card on Drank and Champagne. And then we'll have another episode of You've Got to Be Shot Tinning Me out sometime tomorrow night, looking ahead at Saturday's Shot Tin card. So a lot of racing. Got about a month till Breeders' Cup. Let's make some money, guys. Have a good weekend.